On the outside, these people may appear fit and well, but they all face an illness riddled with skepticism. A covert condition hidden from the public, but endured by family and friends. It's not life-threatening, but can keep them bedridden for months or even years. These people live with chronic fatigue syndrome. The feeling of tiredness is common to us all, but for Catherine Tate, maintaining enough energy to stay active is part of her daily life.
I need about 12 hours sleep a night. I mean, probably even people in my life probably don't know the details in terms of how much sleep I would need. Between the ages of kind of 15 and 19, I was kind of bedridden.
Catherine Tate's symptoms started with glandular fever and pancreatitis, and then developed into chronic fatigue syndrome. As her condition worsened, she found it increasingly harder to participate in her education.
I would sleep for 16 hours and then I'd manage to have a shower, and then I would be just basically needing to lie down for the rest of the day. I think it's quite common for someone to know someone who's got ME, but not necessarily know the extent to which that affects their life.
Joel is an electronics engineer and a technical writer. After returning to work after a bad case of glandular fever, Joel began to find it increasingly difficult to complete a full day at work.
Like most viruses, just give it time, you come right. And things came back to normal, and then over about 4 or 5 months, things just got harder and harder, and I just remember just being tired all the time. I just went downhill and crashed in a big screaming heap one day and sort of left work in tears, which I'd never done before. I said to my boss, look, I just can't work full time at the moment, and I had a very understanding boss at the time, and he was good. He just said, look, work whatever hours you can, take whatever time off. So I dropped down, I started doing 4 days a week. The other thing I did was I turned off my alarm clock, and if I woke up at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'd go into work a little bit later. Some days I didn't wake up till 10 o'clock.
Ros Vallings is New Zealand's leading expert in chronic fatigue syndrome, as well as a general practitioner. Originating from England, Dr. Vallings came to New Zealand to set up her own medical practice.
We were at the London Hospital in Britain, which was just down the road from the Royal Free Hospital, and they'd had a big epidemic of a bad flu among the staff at the Royal Free, and a lot of those people came into our hospital for investigation. In those days it was known as Royal Free disease, and that became known gradually as ME in Britain.
Joel is on his way to see Ros Vallings to discuss managing his symptoms more effectively.
Coming to see Rosamond at the moment is good because my symptoms are up and I'm feeling quite bad with it, so it's a good time to see her. Rosamond is a very well-known expert on ME. To come and see her seems to be the logical progression. She can obviously give me advice on sort of lifestyle choices and things like that and other options.
Oh, hello, Joel. Nice to meet
Hello.
you. This illness can strike all people, from young children right through to the elderly, all races, but I think the couch potatoes don't get it so readily.
My name's Beth. Pre-ME, I trained as a nurse. I was very anxious not to come out with a student loan, so I had 4 part-time jobs. And when I finished my training, I continued with 1 part-time job while I worked full-time as a theatre nurse and became the manager of a 3-clinic paramedical practice. So I thoroughly enjoyed that job. It was very stressful, very long hours.
People that get the illness are often high-achieving, striving kind of people.
Early '99, I bought my first home. I was quite driven. I went from being very active, very fit. I was cycling, horse riding, swimming. I was so busy and working such long hours, I'd be planting trees at night by torchlight because I didn't have enough time during the day.
The high-achieving people, if they do get an illness like a bad attack of flu or glandular fever, they tend to keep going.
Towards the end of 1999, I realised I was becoming quite unwell, and I just continued to get sicker and sicker. And by Christmas, I was virtually bedridden. And after many medical tests, my doctor referred me to Dr. Vallings, who's a specialist, basically New Zealand's authority in ME.
I think it was when I did some research here in Auckland and met a whole lot of people with the illness and realised there was virtually nothing much out there for them in the way of support. Then there was a nasty epidemic of illness in Tapanui in Southland. From this small farming community, a number of people remained chronically sick for a very long time. There were gradually a sort of feeling of people getting together and realising they were all looking at the same thing.
Catherine Harris has been a sufferer of ME for 8 years after having been afflicted with the disease shortly after becoming a lawyer.
I guess I'm what you'd class as one of those big overachievers. I went to university and got myself 2 degrees. I got a law degree and a commerce degree in economics. Got myself admitted to the bar as a barrister and solicitor. And in about March 2000, I just felt really sick at work one day. My boss said, "Oh look, just go home and come back in a couple of days when you feel better." I went home and I just started getting worse and worse. I was having muscle cramps everywhere across my body. They were so bad in my chest I had to be rushed into hospital because they thought I was having a heart attack. And your brain just feels swollen and you feel terrible. And that was the last time I had a normal life.
In an illness like ME and CFS, the diagnosis becomes a crucial step in overcoming these barriers.
It's kind of like a narrowing of the field. Many people get very frustrated because they have a lot of blood tests and things and they're endlessly told, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with you, all your tests are normal." So we have to go through an enormous detection process in order to finally come to a diagnosis.
At the top of the list, my doctor ruled out was depression, because I was depressed, but that was a symptom, not the cause.
People who are depressed do get a lot of symptoms of physical illness, and many times if we treat the depression they are completely okay. However, once we've treated the depression in a CFS patient, we'll often then see the real illness for what it is and we can make that diagnosis.
The problem with ME is that it's a diagnosis of exclusion. There's nothing that will tell you this person has ME. They've got to exclude everything else that they have tests for.
At the time I was diagnosed with kind of post-viral fatigue syndrome, and for me that felt kind of more connected to the glandular fever, and so that felt quite kind of tangible, and the name kind of ME was kind of floated amongst that.
From its first discovery, ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome, has faced an uphill battle against skepticism.
Initially, when I was really quite unwell, when I would go into hospital, I faced quite a lot of disbelief. At that time I was needing quite a lot of sleep. That was sort of almost faced with this perceived laziness, and this teenager who should be kind of off at school like everyone else, kind of her age.
The illness is a very cruel illness, but having to fight the illness and get my head around the fact that I'd gone from being very fit and well to being so very, very ill, and also at a time when I was had so much to fight, having to also fight misperceptions.
There was a lot of scepticism about this illness for many years because after that early Royal Free epidemic it was accepted as a physical illness, and then a group of psychiatrists came along and started saying, "Oh no, it's all in the mind," and that of course changed the whole thinking of the illness, and I think many people suffered as a result of that.
The Matthews family have had to cope with both mother and daughter suffering from the condition, as well as facing scepticism, which comes hand in hand with the illness.
I married Wendy about 22 years ago, and we've had 3 children, 2 pregnancies, 1 pregnancy being twins. Everything seemed to be good, usual hassles with too many babies at once and not enough time.
I was one of these people that used to wake up in the morning and couldn't wait to get in the day.
She was a human dynamo, very much on the go. And then Wendy became ill.
The irony of ME is that the immune system, which is supposed to protect the body, ends up attacking it.
In most people it will be triggered by a virus of some sort. The immune system becomes very overactive to fight the bugs, and then the immune system remains in a chronically activated state.
About 14 years ago, and we'd been away on a holiday and I got a flu. As Sarah, one of my daughters, got it at the same time.
If that chronically activated state lasts for 6 months, what we would have initially called post-viral syndrome is now going to be called chronic fatigue syndrome.
I just kept getting more and more sick, and eventually they put me into hospital. Didn't quite come up with the right diagnosis. I went home, ended up in hospital again because I was very sick, and this time under a diagnostician, and he diagnosed the ME. They said to me, "You've got ME, we really can't do anything for you. It'll take you 2 years I just remember the ride home from the hospital just thinking, 2 years? And I can still remember. And it's been 14.
Joel has visited Ross Vallings to get back in control of his ME. The stress of work has once again brought on the symptoms of chronic fatigue.
Rosamond was fantastic. She made me feel quite comfortable. For me, it's quite a good feeling to know that I'm probably on the road to recovery, which is actually a nice feeling. It's a bit exciting because she's given us a few new things to try, things that we hadn't heard of or thought of, like increasing the amount of salt in our diet. And she suggested I go out and do some sort of targeted relaxation, some massage or yoga.
Ros from the start of the consultation was really positive with Joel, with what he'd actually been doing already. He already has days that are really, really good, and so the chances of him beating this thing are really high.